I bent down to pick up a crumpled napkin when I heard my son scoff. "Can someone move the cleaner? She's ruining the shot." Laughter rippled through the crowd. His fiancée, the planner, even the photographer chuckled. He didn't recognize me. I wore the uniform on purpose. I smiled, nodded politely, then walked away before anyone noticed me flip the switch to the backup generator. You raise them with everything, and somehow they forget you gave them anything at all. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I wasn't always invisible. There was a time when Adam would run into my arms at full speed, sticky with jelly and trust, and press his tiny cheek against mine like I was his whole world. Back then, we didn't have much. A one-bedroom apartment, above a noisy diner, peeling linoleum floors, second-hand coats. But I had him, and that was enough. I was 24 when I became a mother. His father left before the first ultrasound. Said he wasn't cut out for fatherhood. I said fine, I'd be mother and father. Love was never going to be what we lacked. I cleaned houses in the mornings, waited tables at night. Between shifts, I taught myself bookkeeping from free library books and business laws from torn internet printouts. I kept a notebook full of dreams, a house with windows that opened properly, a yard with hydrangeas, a business I could run without begging for days off when Adam got sick. He was 6 when I started working at Sterling House, a grand old estate, with creaky floors and chandeliers that made your breath catch. I started as a cleaner, then moved up to assistant property manager. I learned everything: budgets, vendors, how to charm difficult clients, how to stretch $1 and make it look like 10. When the owners divorced and put the estate up for sale, I made them an offer with a check I shouldn't have had, and a loan against everything I owned. They laughed. But 3 months later, when no other buyers appeared and I came back with cash, scraped, together from 4 silent partners and 7 years of savings, they didn't laugh. I became the silent owner of Sterling House. The paperwork was clean, no fanfare, no announcement, just a woman with keys, a backbone, and a debt that could crush her, but I paid it off, quietly, methodically. By the time Adam entered college, I'd turned the estate into one of the most exclusive private venues in the state. I didn't tell him, not because I was ashamed, but because I wanted him to grow up, without entitlement. I never wanted him to think money made people important. I told him I worked in event logistics. Let him believe the nice homes we moved into were from smart investing. He never asked questions. I suppose to him, money had always been there, like air, like me. He was a sweet boy once, thoughtful, smart, but slowly, without warning, the sweetness calcified into something colder: ambition, ego, maybe fear of being ordinary. Somewhere along the way, he began to measure people by what they wore, how they spoke, who they knew. I told myself it was just a phase. I told myself he'd see the world more clearly once he had his heart broken or worked a minimum wage job. But heartbreak never came, and I never made him work. That was my mistake. I thought protecting him was love. He called one afternoon, voice casual. "Mom, Talia and I want to throw an engagement party. Somewhere nice, you know? Elegant, not too showy." I offered Sterling House, told him it was owned by a family friend. He jumped at the offer, thrilled at the discount. He didn't even ask the name. "Just one thing," I said. "Don't mention me to the planner. I'll be working that night anyway, behind the scenes." "Still doing that logistics thing?" He chuckled. I smiled. Something like that. The irony wasn't lost on me. The estate he wanted to impress his fiancée's family with, I built it, brick by brick, flower by flower. Every mirror polished with hands that once cradled his fevered body through childhood flus. But that day, he looked right through me. He asked for elegance. I gave him everything, and I asked for nothing but silence in return. Adam called it just some fancy garden venue. never knowing the hands that polished every tile once cradled his feverish childhood head. Sterling House sits atop a quiet ridge, wrapped in ivy and old secrets. Most guests assume it's owned by a generational family with old money and antique values. No one suspects it was rebuilt by a woman who once slept in her car outside the same gates. The estate has its own staff, most of whom have worked with me for years. They know who I am. They also know never to call me Mrs. Carter when clients are near. I'm just the manager. It's a game we've all learned to play. When Adam asked to use the venue, I had the team treat him like any other guest. No favors, no winks, just professional courtesy. I even assigned our best planner to work with him, Lena, who's been with me since day one. I told her the truth, of course. She hesitated. Are you sure? You want him to go through the full process, like a client? I nodded. Exactly like a client. The event planning began quickly. Talia, Adam's fiancée, came from a family of social climbers. She wanted prestige, but hated appearing like she wanted it. That's a tricky needle to thread, and it showed in her attitude. She nitpicked floral arrangements, insulted servers, under her breath, and constantly dropped phrases like tastefully minimalist luxury, which often just meant make it expensive. They never suspected a thing. When they walked the property for the first time, Talia smiled at the courtyard and said, "This is charming, not over the top. Who owns it?" Lena responded smoothly, "It's held by a private trust. Long time. Family business. Very hands-on." Talia nodded approvingly. "Good. I hate those corporate venues where you're just a number." Adam was more dismissive. "It'll do," he said. "Just make sure the photos look high-end." He walked through the halls I restored with my own hands, touched railings I refinished at midnight, and didn't recognize a thing. In a way, that was the plan. I wanted the venue to be seamless, to let the event shine, not me. Still, something in his indifference stung more than I expected. On the day of the engagement party, I dressed in a cleaner's uniform, one of our standard dark gray tunics with a name tag that read Marie. I swept walkways and arranged chairs before guests arrived, head down, silent. A few newer staff didn't recognize me and treated me as they would any temp worker. That was fine. It made the performance easier. Lena gave me a look when she passed. Me in the kitchen. She mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded. I wanted to see my son unfiltered, the version he showed the world when he thought no one was watching, especially no one who mattered. The first incident came early. Talia arrived with her maid of honor and made a beeline for the catering table. When one of the servers accidentally bumped her, she scowled and snapped, "Do you people even train your staff?" I was nearby, wiping down a table. She didn't even glance in my direction. Later, I was in the hall when Adam walked past with two groomsmen. One of them asked if he'd considered a private club for the venue instead. Adam smirked. "I'm not paying full price for a party. Some random estate offered us a deal. Place is run by old school folks. As long as it looks good in pictures, I don't care who owns it." I stood perfectly still as they walked by, my son's voice, once soft and full of wonder, now filled with condescension. Then, during a tech check, the photographer waved me out of the background as I adjusted candles on a table. "Mind stepping aside, hon?" he said without looking up. "Trying to get a clean shot," Adam chimed in from across the room. "Can someone move the cleaner? She's ruining the aesthetic." That was the first time he really saw me, but not as me. Just a distraction, a problem to solve. He didn't recognize the way I flinched, or the way Lena froze. I straightened, whispered, "Excuse me," and left the room. I didn't cry. Not then. There wasn't time for that. Outside, I circled the side garden and sat on the low stone bench beneath the wisteria. I'd planted that wisteria myself the week after I'd signed the papers on the estate. Its roots were deeper than Adam knew. I sat there and thought about silence. how it had been my armor, and now, somehow, my punishment. Was it my fault for hiding who I was? Did I shelter him so much that I erased the very values I lived by? Did I hand him the fruit of my labor without ever letting him feel the trees? Thorns? Inside, the music started. Guests mingled. Talia laughed too loud. Adam poured champagne into his best friend's glass and toasted to fresh starts and upward trajectories. He had no idea how far he'd already fallen. In that moment, I realized my son hadn't just lost respect for others. He'd lost the very heart I raised him with. As the sun dipped behind the ridge, Sterling House lit up like a cathedral. Warm amber lights washed over the stone terrace. Music spilled from hidden speakers tucked behind manicured hedges. Everything looked perfect on the outside. I returned to my post near the catering tent, clipboard in hand, head low. A cleaner, a prop in someone else's celebration. Exactly how he wanted it. Guests began to pour in. Talia's family, all pearls and posture, and Adam's college friends, loud with money and stories about back in Wharton. I moved among them like a shadow, replacing napkins, refilling, water, smiling when no one looked. Then came the wine spill. A guest gestured too hard during a story about skiing in Austria, and a full glass of red sloshed across the linen tablecloth and down my front. I flinched, but stayed quiet. "Oh no," the woman gasped, waving at me. "You, girl, can you take care of this?" I was already blotting the spill, trying not to draw attention. Adam looked over, rolled his eyes, and said with a grin, "Guess this is why we don't trust bargain venues." Laughter. Easy, careless, not even cruel, just thoughtless. Talia didn't miss a beat. "Can we get someone competent over here, please?" I stood, wine still dripping from my tunic, and gave a tight nod. "Of course, ma'am." They didn't see me. Not really, and for the first time that night, I didn't want them to. I walked to the staff area and changed into a backup uniform. My hands shook as I buttoned it. Not from anger, no, something colder. Grief, because somewhere under all that polished entitlement was the boy who used to hold my hand in crowded grocery stores and say, "Don't let go, Mama." And now he'd forgotten I was ever someone. Worth holding on to. Back outside, I passed the courtyard and overheard Talia arguing with the head server. She wanted the risotto replated because the parsley looked uneven. "We're not paying for sloppy," she said. "This isn't some budget wedding." The server, a sweet young man named Jordan, glanced toward me helplessly. I stepped in, calm as ever. "We'll take care of it," I told her. She sneered. "Finally, someone who knows their place." I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. That was the moment Lena pulled me aside. "They're getting worse," she whispered. "Are you sure you want to keep doing this?" I nodded slowly. Not much longer. Then the toast happened. Adam stood near the archway, champagne flute raised. His voice rang clear and strong. "To Talia, the love of my life, and to everyone here who made tonight possible. It means the world to us." Pause. "And here's to building a life together and leaving the past where it belongs." He smiled. Everyone clapped, and in that moment, I felt something inside me shift. Not crack, but peel, like a layer of old paint falling away from wood underneath. What was left wasn't raw or fragile. It was bare. Honest. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't angry. I was finished. I stepped back into the kitchen and handed my clipboard to Lena. "I'm done for the night." She blinked. "You're leaving?" "I've seen enough." Outside, the laughter continued. Adam's world sparkled under fairy lights and privilege. He didn't know it was built on the back of sacrifice, of midnight scrubbing and whispered lullabies in rooms that smelled like bleach. As I walked past the staff corridor, Jordan caught up to me. Why do you let them talk to you like that? He asked, eyes wide with quiet fury. You're the reason any of this exists. I smiled at him gently. Because sometimes the best way to see someone's soul is to let them believe they're alone. I didn't wait for a reply. I left the clipboard, the radio, and the weight of my silence behind. And just before I stepped out the service gate, I paused. I looked back at Sterling House, bathed in gold, proud and oblivious, and I whispered under my breath, "Let them learn." When he raised his glass, I saw no mother in his eyes, just a man proud to forget where he came from. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove. Nowhere in particular, just far enough to let the music of the party fade into memory. The road curved through darkness as I let the windows down and the wind slap my face, sharp and cold. I needed it to stay awake, to stay human. I pulled into a modest motel off the interstate around midnight. The kind of place I once called home for a week when Adam was 4 and I'd lost my job at the laundromat. Back then, we shared a single bed. He used to fall asleep with his fingers curled in my hair like he was afraid I'd leave in the night. Now, he wouldn't recognize me in a lineup. Not in that uniform. Not in that moment. The motel room smelled faintly of old soap and fried chicken. I dropped my bag and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, replaying his words. She's just a cleaner. It wasn't the insult that hurt. It was the belief behind it. The way he said it so casually, so confidently, like it was fact. Like just was all there ever was. I thought I'd cry, but nothing came. Just silence, heavy and strange. Like mourning someone who hadn't died, at least not all at once. I closed my eyes, and the memories came, fast and raw. Flashback, 1998. Adam had bronchitis. I was scrubbing floors in a downtown office at 1 a.m., pausing every 20 minutes to check on him in the janitor's closet where he slept on a makeshift bed of towels. His forehead was hot, breath rattling. I whispered lullabies over the hum of vacuum cleaners. Just hold on, baby, Mama's almost done. Flashback, 2004. I was denied a small business loan, again. No collateral, no male partner. That night, Adam asked why I didn't eat dinner. I told him I wasn't hungry. He was 8. He offered me his cornbread and said, "You can have my share, Mama. I had lunch." Flashback, 2009, the day I signed the papers for Sterling House. The banker slid them across the table, expression skeptical. I wore a blazer from Goodwill and shoes with taped soles. My hands shook as I wrote my name. That night, Adam called from college to say he'd made Dean's list. I didn't tell him what I'd done. I just said, "I'm proud of you," and now he called me just a cleaner. I sat in that motel chair for hours. At some point, dawn crawled in through the blinds, pink and forgiving. There was a knock at the door. Room service. I hadn't ordered anything. A young woman stood there, no older than Adam, holding a thermos of coffee and a paper bag. "Jordan sent this," she said. "From Sterling. He said you didn't eat last night." I thanked her and closed the door, gently. Inside the bag, a slice of quiche, a handwritten note on a napkin. "You're not invisible, not to all of us. Thank you for all of it." I stared at the words until they blurred, and finally, I cried. Not for what Adam said, but for what I allowed. For the years I spent hiding my worth in the name of love. For raising a son who never learned to see the invisible labor that made his life possible. I called my lawyer at 8:03 a.m. sharp. "I'd like to revise my will," I said. Immediately, there was a pause. "What's prompting the change, Mrs. Carter?" "I just realized," I whispered. "Some people inherit silver spoons, and others inherit silence, and I'm done handing out both." He said he'd draft the documents by Monday. At 9:00 a.m., Lena called to check on me. I thanked her and asked if the venue survived the power loss. We switched to emergency lighting, she said. It wasn't elegant, but they got through it. I didn't tell her I was the one who disabled the generator. Some lessons are best taught by shadows. At noon, Talia called. She was frantic, breathless. Hi, I think you work with the estate? Marie, is it? I kept my voice level. Yes, this is Marie. We need to speak with your manager, whoever owns that place. There were major disruptions last night. Lights went out. Staff disappeared. It was unacceptable. I understand, I said. Can you contact them for us? We want to issue a formal complaint. I'll pass along your concerns, she huffed. Honestly, it felt like no one knew what they were doing. You'd think a place that fancy would have, I don't know, real professionals. I hung up before she could finish. That was the moment I decided to truly step back. Let them all stand on the stage without the scaffolding. Let the absence speak louder than the applause ever did. Have you ever hidden your true worth to see how someone would treat you? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. I didn't need to be seen that night. I needed to see. And what I saw shattered me. I spent the next day wrapped in silence. The motel room was nothing more than a bed, a table, and a mirror, but it felt like sanctuary. No chandeliers, no music, no eyes watching me wait on them. Just the slow hum of the air conditioning and the sound of my own breath. It felt good, uncomplicated, honest. By afternoon, I'd booked 3 nights in advance. No one knew where I was, not even Lena. I needed space to think clearly, and I needed that space to belong to no one but me. The quiet gave me room to remember who I was before titles and sacrifice and expectations. Not a mother, not a businesswoman, just a woman who had built something out of nothing. I thought back to the first time I saw Sterling House, when I was still mopping its marble floors and marveling at how light hit the stained glass windows. I remembered running my fingers across the old wood paneling and whispering, someday. And then someday came, and I gave it all away to a boy who never understood the soil it grew from. But now I wasn't mourning anymore. I was reclaiming. That evening, I ordered room service. Nothing fancy, just soup and bread. I watched the sun slip behind the trees from my window. It was the first meal I'd eaten slowly in months. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Lena. Lena, just wanted you to know, the staff handled everything after you left. Jordan really stepped up. You'd be proud. Me. I am. Thank you. A moment later, she followed up. Lena, they think you're the owner now. There are rumors. The staff's saying something happened. Should I set them straight? I stared at the message for a long time and then typed, no. Let them wonder. Later that night, I opened my laptop and pulled up my estate records. Everything I owned, every investment was tied to Sterling House, not just financially, but emotionally. I clicked on a document I hadn't opened in years. Beneficiary structure. It had one name on it. Adams. I stared at it for a long while. Then clicked Edit. That night, I rewrote everything. Not out of revenge, but out of clarity. The estate would now be divided equally among 4 people. Lena, Jordan, and 2 longtime kitchen staffers who had stayed with me through a pandemic. And a flood. Each of them had shown me loyalty without needing credit. Adam would still receive something, but not the legacy. Not the heart of what I built. He hadn't earned it. Not yet. The next morning, I received a call from the estate's head technician. Hey, just letting you know. We had a small incident. Backup generator failed during the party. Power cut out. For 20 minutes. Weird timing. But it's working again now. I said, hiding the smile in my voice. Glad it's resolved. That was the extent of it. No chaos, no disasters, just enough discomfort to show them what the night would have looked like without me behind the curtain. I think that's the part that surprised me most, how easily things could go on without Me, once I stepped back, it wasn't painful. It was freeing. At noon, my phone rang again. This time, it was Talia. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened. "Hi, Marie," or "Whoever you really are. I don't know what happened, but Adam's been acting strange since the party. He thinks there was something you were hiding? I don't know what this is, but it's stressing him out and making things weird. With my family. I just want to clear the air. If there's something we need to know, you should come forward." Her voice sounded less polished than usual. Less curated, but I didn't call back. I'd spent decades fixing things for people who didn't know I was holding the glue. Now I wanted to see what happened when I didn't intervene. That night, I returned to Sterling House. Not for anyone else, for myself. It was empty. Clean again. Quiet. I walked the halls alone, touching the banister I'd restained myself, gliding my fingers over the velvet chairs I'd picked out during a clearance sale 12 years ago. Every inch of it had been earned, not gifted, not inherited. I stopped in the grand hall where Adam had made his toast the night before. To leaving the past behind, he'd said. He had no idea how deeply I intended to take that advice. For once, I didn't fix everything. I let the silence teach what my words no longer could. 3 days after the party, the silence shattered. It started with a video. One of the catering assistants, some tech-savvy college kid, had captured a moment from the party, Adam gesturing toward me, laughing and saying, "Can someone move the cleaner?" The camera had zoomed in, just enough to catch my face. It wasn't the insult that caught people's attention. It was the look I gave him, calm, hollow, ancient, someone in. The comments wrote, "That's not a cleaner, that's someone who knows something." The clip went viral within hours. A slow burn kind of viral. Older viewers on Facebook, Reddit threads filled with phrases like quiet revenge and hidden matriarch. Then another staffer, bless her bold heart, posted a TikTok. "Y'all, the woman in that video, she's not the cleaner. She owns the estate. The entire engagement party? She let her own son host it there. He didn't even recognize her." By the next morning, my inbox was flooded. Interviews, podcast requests. Women writing to say they saw themselves in me. Mothers, caregivers, quiet warriors. But I ignored it all. This wasn't about the internet. This was about Adam. He showed up at Sterling House unannounced 2 days later. I watched him through the security camera, pacing the entryway in a crisp shirt, hairstyled, trying to look composed but unraveling at the edges. I instructed Lena to let him wait. An hour, then 2. Finally, I stepped into the foyer. He turned, relief flashing across his face, then uncertainty. "Mom?" he asked. "Is it true?" I said nothing, just looked at him. His voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me? Why would you pretend? To be staff?" I didn't blink. "I wasn't pretending. I am staff. I clean what others leave behind." He looked down. "That video, people are making fun of me." "That's not why I did it." He shook his head, frustration creeping in. "Then why? To humiliate me?" "No," I said softly. "To see you, without the filter, without the performance." He stared at me, jaw clenched. "You think I'm a bad person." "I think," I replied, "you became a man who values image over integrity. And I needed to know if that man could see me without being told who I was." He fell quiet. For the first time in a long while, he looked small. Not because he was being scolded, but because he finally understood the scale of what he'd missed. "I didn't mean what I said," he whispered. "I didn't know it was you." "And that," I said gently, "is the part that hurts most." The fallout came swiftly. Talia's parents were furious, not because of how I'd been treated, but because of the optics. "This could ruin the family's name," her mother reportedly told Adam. "We can't have you associated with viral scandals." Talia called off the engagement the same week. Left him a voicemail. "This isn't what I signed up for. I thought you were more established." He didn't call me after that. Didn't text either. I didn't expect him to. Sometimes the real unraveling isn't loud. It's a slow, quiet thread that slips from the hem of a life you thought was seamless. At Sterling House, things began to shift. Jordan was offered a permanent supervisory position. Lena started mentoring the younger staff. Guests began requesting tours with the woman from the video. But I declined everyone. I didn't want to become a spectacle. I wanted to become smaller, to return to the bones of the thing. There was peace in invisibility again. But this time, it wasn't forced. It was chosen. Then came the letter, not an email, not a text. A handwritten envelope left at the back office. The handwriting was shaky, but I recognized it instantly. "Mom, I've been going through a lot. Not as an excuse, just truth. I've started therapy. I'm working with a nonprofit, volunteering at a shelter once a week. They don't care about my resume there. Just if I listen, if I show up. I didn't write to apologize. Not yet. I don't deserve that step. I wrote to say, I see you now. You were never invisible. I was blind. If you'll let me, I want to learn who you are. Not just the woman who raised me, but the woman who built. I'm not asking for anything, just your time. Adam." I read it 3 times before folding it neatly and placing it in my desk drawer. I didn't cry. Not yet. But something loosened in my chest. A stitch, once pulled tight with disappointment, gently released. The lights may have gone out, but the truth was finally lit. It was nearly 6 weeks before I saw Adam again, not in person, not by design. I was at the estate early one morning, checking in on a leaky pipe in the west kitchen, when I saw him, out in the garden. Alone, he was trimming the wisteria. He wore jeans, a plain t-shirt, and work gloves 2 sizes too big. There was sweat on his forehead, dirt under his fingernails. His phone was nowhere in sight. I didn't interrupt, just watched from the hallway, behind the lace curtain. He was careful with the branches, methodical, like he was learning something, for the first time, and didn't want to ruin it. Later that day, Lena told me he'd been coming twice a week, quietly, volunteering with the grounds crew. He never asked for acknowledgement, never corrected people who thought he was just a temp. He swept leaves, refilled water stations, polished doorknobs. "He's not the same," Lena said. "Still proud, but different, softer, less curated." I nodded, but said nothing. Part of me wanted to reach out. The other part, the wiser part, knew better. Growth isn't proven by apology. It's proven by consistency. A few days later, I found another letter in my office drawer. Still showing up, the wisteria's blooming. Again. I asked Lena about it, and she told me you planted it yourself, that the roots go deep. I guess some things survive storms better than we realize. That day, I let myself write back, just a small note on a folded card. "Thank you for tending to what you once ignored. The wisteria is strong, but it still needs light to thrive." I left it in his locker. Then one morning, he asked to see me, not as the owner, not as the mother he forgot, just as me. We met in the small greenhouse behind the estate, where I often went to breathe. No cameras, no filters, just glass, vines, and the sound of our old life between us. Adam stood awkwardly, hands in his pockets. "I wanted to say something," he began, then stopped, swallowed hard. "I don't know what you think of me anymore, but I know I made you feel small, invisible. That's not something a son should ever do to his mother." I looked at him, truly looked. There was still some of the boy I raised in his eyes, but less arrogance, more weight. the kind that comes from falling and choosing to stand again. I didn't want you to hurt, I said. I wanted you to be grounded, and I thought if I hid the struggle, you'd grow up feeling safe. But I forgot that struggle teaches empathy. I gave you comfort and starved you of understanding. He took that in, didn't argue. Now I'm trying to unlearn, he whispered, trying to see people, trying to see you, not just as my mother, but as someone who lived a life before I even opened my eyes. Silence filled the greenhouse, a soft, living thing between us. I didn't cry. Neither did he. But something sacred passed in that silence, a kind of mutual acknowledgement, not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. He told me he'd broken things off with Talia fully, said she never really liked him, only what he represented. I think that's what I've been chasing for years, he admitted, being someone who looks successful instead of actually being someone who is decent. He asked if he could keep working at Sterling House, not as my son, just as a man earning back his place in the world. I agreed, but I added, "You'll be evaluated just like the rest of the staff. And don't expect legacy. That ship sailed when you couldn't see." "Who was standing beside you?" He nodded. "I'm not asking for legacy. I'm asking for labor and time." That was the first thing he ever said to me that felt like it had dirt under its nails. Real, earned. Later that evening, I walked the garden alone. The scent of jasmine clung to the air. Wind curled around the trees like old music. For the first time in months, my heart felt light. Not because everything was healed, but because I'd finally stopped trying to force healing. Sometimes the most powerful thing a mother can do is step aside and let her child rebuild what he broke, with his own hands, and if he never does, I will still be whole. He came looking for inheritance. Instead, he inherited the truth. In the months that followed, life at Sterling House returned to its natural rhythm, but something had changed in the air. Not in a grand, sweeping way. More, like a quiet recalibration, like the way autumn slowly reclaims the heat of summer without anyone noticing until the leaves start to fall. Adam continued to show up, twice a week, sometimes more. He no longer brought excuses or questions, just his hands, his presence, his effort. One morning, I watched from the terrace as he helped Jordan repair a cracked stone step near the rose beds. It was back-breaking work, the kind he used to scoff at. But there he was, dirt on his shirt, sweat on his brow, laughing quietly with the staff he once ignored. He didn't ask for praise, and I didn't offer it. Not yet. That was the test, after all. Whether he could continue doing good without needing to be seen for it. Meanwhile, I finalized the estate's restructuring. Lena, Jordan, and 2 other longtime staff, Carlos and Miriam, were now equal stakeholders in Sterling House. Their shares wouldn't make them rich overnight, but it guaranteed them lifetime security and a voice at the table. They earned it, not through titles, but through unwavering service. My lawyer looked at me, pen in hand, and asked, "Are you sure you want to do this? It's not the usual choice." "No," I said, smiling softly, "but it's the right one." And with that signature, the house I built became bigger than my name. As for Adam, I didn't cut him out entirely. That would have been easy, vengeful even. But motherhood, real motherhood, isn't about retribution. It's about clarity, boundaries, truth. He would inherit a trust fund. Enough to live simply, modestly, but not the house, not the legacy. That wasn't punishment. It was consequence. And if he truly wanted to be a part of what I built, he would need to earn it, not by blood, but by behavior. Then, one chilly morning, he left a final note tucked under my garden shears. "I'm applying for a job in another city. I don't want to coast on the estate's shadow. I needed this time to see who I was when no one was watching. Thank you for letting me be invisible long enough to find the man behind the mask. I know I won't inherit Sterling House, but I hope someday I earn back something more valuable, your trust." I folded the note and placed it beside the first letter he ever sent. Weeks passed. Talia posted an engagement photo with someone new, a finance executive from New York. She looked the same, polished, pristine, but colder. And yet, when I saw her, I didn't feel anger, just distance. Like a chapter I'd closed so long ago, I barely remembered how it started. The video, the one that went viral, faded into the internet's rearview mirror, as all things do. But sometimes older women still approach me during events. "You're the one from the story, aren't you?" they whisper. And I just smile and say, "I'm one of many, because I am a cleaner, a builder, a mother, a mirror." Now, every Sunday, I walk the perimeter of the estate. No clipboard, no phone, just my eyes and the quiet. I listen to the creak of old gates, the flutter of curtains through cracked windows. I tend to the garden beds with bare hands. One afternoon, as I trimmed the wisteria, Lena came up beside me. "He wrote again," she said. "From Chicago. He's working at a shelter. Says he walks to work." I didn't say anything at first, just nodded. The shears clicked softly in my hand. "He mentioned you," she added. "Said he's finally starting to understand why you chose to stay quiet. That dignity isn't loud." That word, dignity, sat in my chest like a warm stone. And then, a few days later, I received a small brown package in the mail. Inside, a photo. It was Adam. Smiling, yes, but not the camera-ready smile. A tired, honest one. He stood in front of a mural he helped paint at the shelter. His clothes were plain, his hands visibly calloused. On the back of the photo, written in familiar handwriting. "Still learning, still showing up, still remembering who taught me how to begin." Have you ever forgiven someone, not with words but with silence? Tell me what happened. I'm listening. He didn't need my words. He needed my absence long enough to miss the sound of my presence. It's funny what people assume when they hear the word cleaner. They imagine someone faceless, gloved, bent low. They don't picture someone with a business ledger, a real estate portfolio, or a memory sharp enough to recall the exact moment her son stopped looking her in the eyes when speaking to her. But that's the power of silence. The world underestimates it, until it echoes louder than any scream. For years, I confused invisibility with humility. I believed that staying behind the scenes meant I was being noble, strong, unselfish. But the truth? Sometimes silence is just fear dressed in virtue, fear that if I showed my full self, my real self, I'd be accused of arrogance, or worse, of changing the balance between mother and son. So I hid. I wore plain clothes, drove modest cars, let him believe our comfort came from smart budgeting, and in doing so, I built a bridge with no weight limit, and then wondered why he never learned how to walk carefully across it. But the day he called me just a cleaner, that was the day the bridge cracked, not because I was hurt by the label, but because I realized he never saw what I chose to give up. And that's the thing, isn't it? We pass down values we hope they'll notice. We model restraint, grit, quiet service. But without context, those lessons turn invisible. So I left, not out of spite, but because I finally understood that love doesn't mean staying silent through disrespect. Sometimes love is walking away until the echo of your absence teaches what your voice never could. And now I walk through Sterling House not as a shadow, but as its spine. I run the books, I train new staff, I prune the gardens, I meet with couples looking for a venue that feels lived in but still magical. They don't know it, but the magic isn't in the chandeliers or the ivy. It's in the woman who once cleaned those chandeliers with blistered hands and still returns each season to check the bulbs herself. As for Adam, he's still becoming. He sends letters now and then. No grand apologies, no dramatic gestures, just updates, honest ones. I bought a coffee for a man who reminded me of you. He said, "Thank you," like it hurt. I walked past a mirror and didn't recognize myself. That felt good. I'm teaching a budgeting class to single moms at the shelter. Still not sure they trust me. That's fair. Sometimes I respond, sometimes I don't. But I read every word. Because forgiveness isn't a door you fling open. It's a light you leave on in case they ever learn how to find their way home. I've stopped worrying about what people think I am. Cleaner, owner, mother. Nobody. I know who I am. I am the hands that built this place. I am the eyes that saw a legacy before it had walls. I am the silence that taught a lesson louder than anger ever could. And more than anything, I am the woman who walked away, not because she was weak, but because she was finally strong enough to be seen only by those who choose to look. In the end, I didn't lose a son. I let go of an illusion. And what came back was real.